everybody, and welcome to another episode of Short Shifts, brought to you by Keepy Carlson. I am your host, Shams Benamor, and we are brought to you by a good friend of the Discord. You've probably heard his name a good amount with all the work he's done to help Cacuffle be better. And with no further ado, Derrick, welcome to the show.
Hi, Shams. Thanks for having me. Happy to be on for another episode of Short Shifts.
Thank you very much for coming on short notice, and let's get right into the news. We got a lot of big stuff, and the first thing to come up we have is Kyle Connor reportedly out 6 to 8 weeks. We still have to see what the coach says. He says he wants to have his doctors, but either way, that injury didn't look so great. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it was a really unfortunate play. Arguably dirty play in the sort of, knee extended out to making contact with Connor, who's a historically incredibly durable player, someone you can draft and be confident they're going to play 82 games for the most part. I don't know the exact count on his Ironman streak, but it was really significant. Aside from COVID, I don't think he's missed games in years. One thing to note, just tonight, Darren Drager on Insider Trading said it is his understanding, based on sort of a second look or whatever ongoing looks are being had, that there's no ligament damage potentially. So this 6 to 8 week recovery timeline, it hasn't been formally confirmed yet. It might end up being less, but that's the number that is out there right now from Mike McIntyre as the reporter.
So I think right now we have is that Ehlers obviously is the beneficiary just because he's going to be put on the top power play, at least for what practice. And then also, I'm a little bit hesitant to say anything else that is a benefit because a stat that I saw yesterday, this is actually before the game, so it was just kind of prophetic, is that Kyle Connor has 20% the total team goals so far. So is there much to be said other than maybe Ehlers is better, or would you just be thinking that this is maybe a downgrade for everybody?
Yeah, I think it has to be, if anyone, good for Ehlers. Maybe bad for Scheifele, but, Ehlers has certainly shown that he can be productive, at times. It's been a rough start to the season for him. I'd say hopefully good for him, probably not great for Scheifele. Everyone else, it's kind of uncertain. Maybe rough for a Morrissey on power play 1, who is otherwise, probably able to benefit from Connor scoring a lot of those goals.
Yeah, it's a shame to see, as you said before, such a strong player with a strong history go down. So hopefully you'll probably hear it by the time the show comes out with a confirmation of the amount. But either way, any length of time is going to be a big shot into this team. And then talking about injuries with not a certain return date, we have Detroit with just a host of issues. First is that crazy play that made Larkin unconscious. Then that resulted in Perron being suspended for 6 games. And then on top of it, we still have Compher being out. He might be back Thursday, but that's the only thing that we have any certainty on. Right now, the coach has said that basically Larkin is out at least a week, and the only reason he said out for that length of time is that's just the length of IR. So we don't know as of this moment if there's going to be anything longer. And then right now, I could give you lines, but basically they have been shuffling all around. And on top of it, they've gone different. I believe today, it was a funny thing. I've never seen this before, is that they actually got the 11-6 or the 11-7 forward defenseman setup. Then usually what will happen is that you'll have a random fourth liner be taken out. So it'd just be, your normal top 9 and then 2 people on the bottom. What the Detroit actually did this game is they did a 11-7, but right now they had just listed Patrick Kane and DeBrincat as their own line, and they're just going to be swinging in random centers as the game goes. And then those are probably DeBrincat is probably the only other forward than Larkin that I would be interested in right now that, you could take your shot on hey, Kopp is going to play more, or Fabbri had a hot streak and all these different things. But honestly, in my opinion, even before this injury, Larkin and DeBrincat were the only really interesting forwards. And then this just makes it worse that I had my chance at all of these Detroit forwards, or at least like the non-obviously owned ones, to do a waiver wire pickup for a stream this week. And I just skipped them all and then took a random stab at Carcone from Arizona because I just didn't want to play the guessing game. What do you think on that strategy? Did I mess up and should have went with an Andrei or a Valletto, or do you think that we should just steer clear of random forwards and try to hope for the best for Detroit?
Well, I did pick up a Detroit streamer myself, but it was more so just for the Monday, Tuesday games this week, and I don't see myself hanging on to them long term. It's actually Robby Fabbri that I went with, but he had a hot streak for a bit in the last few weeks, but has kind of fallen off the good deployment even before the Larkin injury. So I think obviously hold DeBrincat. Hopefully he'll still be able to be somewhat productive in Larkin's absence. But yeah, everyone else, especially the rest of their next few games or busy nights, I don't really see a need to try and stream anyone else if there's probably someone more valuable or more potentially valuable available.
Yeah, I like to joke as a Wings fan that the forward lines are basically like Seattle East, is that any player can randomly go off. It was Fabbri before. I think Sprague has a goal last game and today. Berggren the same. It's that it's just going to be any random person. And then, like, if you're in a deep enough league where, you're looking at third and fourth liners, maybe taking a guess is fine. But I feel like unless you're in the deepest of leagues, that I would be more likely to be taking a second line person I know is going to get a lot of play and another team that trying to throw a dart at one of these tertiary ads on Detroit. So now going from, sadly, from one injury to another, we have an update. Well, as much as an update as we could get from NHL teams at any point. We have been told that Svechnikov is going to be, quote, out for at least a while after we got a MRI or he got one. The last game is that right now, I believe they're 4-1 against the Senators, and they have a top six of Nosen, Aho, and Jarvis, Teravainen, Kakiniemi, and Necas, and the name you haven't heard is Bunting. He's actually on the fourth line right now. So what do you think of this, Derrick?
Well, on the subject of the lines, it's good for everyone except Bunting. You kind of take Carolina's, typical spread out the offense approach, and, you compress it into two lines when you lose a big force like Svechnikov. But yeah, Bunting is the odd one out. It's bad for him. That could flip back as it has flipped a couple times already this season. But for the moment, it seems good for Nason and Jarvis playing on the top line with Aho. Teravainen and Necas, okay with Kotkaniemi on the second line. It's a really unfortunate play for Svechnikov, who was already, injured last year, that continued into the beginning of this season. He wasn't ready to start the season. And then, on a really non-hockey play, taking a cross-check to an unprotected kidney area in front of the net while, kind of vulnerable, bending over. Really unfortunate for him. He certainly has the potential to be, a really valuable fantasy asset, but the injuries have really hurt his name brand value over the last, year, I'd say.
Yeah, it's definitely a shame. I have him in a Showl Keeper League, and I was surprised to see that he wasn't actually going to be starting right away. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll have him in the IR, and once he's back, he's back. And it's just one of those situations, as you said, it's not like, I'm not sure if Frozen Tools has him as a Band-Aid boy, but like at least in this situation, it's like you can't even blame him. He's just taking a cross-check and something comes out of it. So hopefully that a while is weeks and not months, but we'll just have to wait and see and play the NHL game of they're not going to tell us, so we'll just wait until it happens. So sad to see. Now, on another situation of not a lot of information is that kind of came out of nowhere is Seth Jones is out tonight, and all that we have, he's gone back to Chicago for further evaluation. So while he hasn't been doing much on the offensive side, he has been doing decent on the bagger stats, but right now we have Vlasic on power play 2, and I'm not sure who else was going to be playing that much. Is that really in this situation, I say that there's probably not a pickup, but this just makes me a little bit I guess I say a little bit more wary, but even more wary than normally is that I normally am a fan of picking up goalies on bad teams. So, for example, like Mrazek or Soderblom for your short-term streams because they're going to get a lot of shots. But say without Seth Jones against Edmonton, sure, they're going to get a lot of shots, but would you even dare start, say, Mrazek, I believe, is the one starting tonight against a high offensive team like Edmonton? It could be great, but this sounds like a scary situation where it could just be the crater of craters that you could have of just from a defensive output on this already weak team.
Yeah, I come from a background of playing in categories leagues, and I would never start a goalie from the current Chicago team against the current Edmonton team or anything close to it. I just haven't been paying attention, really to the Mrazeks and whatnot of the world. And you can make the case that in a points league format where, save volume is king, they could be valuable, but it does seem, unless your goals against penalties are so low, it definitely seems like a risk. And, losing your lead defender, even if he is, arguably overpaid for what the value he's bringing these days, losing him makes the weak defense even weaker. So I wouldn't, be happy to, I wouldn't be considering really anyone on Chicago at this point. Hang on to Bedard if you have him, but even he has been lost a touch of his magic from earlier in the year, I'd say. Yeah,
it's one of those situations where I think it was early in the season I was joking about I don't want anyone on the Ducks, just basically of that worry about an offensive power, and I think that situation is coming to light possibly, other than St. Bernard, just because you drafted him and he has the pedigree, but I think Chicago takes that mantle for me right now, so I'm with you there. And going forward on another set of injuries, as you can tell is sadly the theme of tonight's show, is we have confirmation that Zacha and McAvoy won't play on Wednesday, and right now they're listed as day-to-day, and it's TBD for Friday, so that maybe might be coming back for the Islanders, but right now, neither of them are out, or neither of them are playing, and that will make a top 6 of DeBrincat and Pasternak centered by Geekie, and then Coyle centering Marchand and Federic, which could be interesting depending on your setup. And then I think the probably the biggest takeaway from this situation, because they have been kind of playing a weird top 9 of spreading out, even though they don't have the greatest forwards, is that they have a power play 1 of DeBrincat, Pasternak, Geekie, Marchand, and Shattenkirk. Most people probably have Marchand and Pasternak, and then depending on how deep your league is, DeBrincat is going to be taken. How do you feel about Geekie and Shattenkirk, even if, say, for a short-term stream, I'm not sure that, Wednesday is going to be a light day, and then we could see how Friday looks depending on your lineups.
Yeah, going back a few days, the update I saw from December 9th was that McAvoy was improving at that time. I don't know for sure, but it feels to me like investing in a Shattenkirk for maybe a game isn't probably the best, use of your ad drops. If you consider, they have Lindholm, who certainly was capable of running the power play last year for chunks of time when McAvoy was out. If they thought McAvoy was going to be out for a while, maybe he would have got that chance again, but instead he's staying with his power play 2 unit and Shattenkirk's just jumping ahead of him into power play 1. To me, that really feels like the McAvoy part of this is going to be short term. In terms of Zacha, I don't know. Again, anyone playing power play 1 with Pasternak for a game could be worthwhile, but yeah, it just doesn't seem, from what we've seen in the news, to be long term.
Yeah, I'm with you. Is that unless you're in your deepest leagues where you're looking for any defenseman that does something, I would be jumping on Shattenkirk because if I remember correctly, he didn't do much in his last stint out there. So I like your thought of maybe that they're bringing him out there just because it's short term and then keeping him at home with his normal unit. So in that situation, we're probably aligned that, unless you're desperate, probably just shy away and use your moves for something that's more long-term or has better upside. Now on to actually some better news is that Tuch looks like he's most likely back for tomorrow's game. He's, at least the coach said, he expects him ready to go. There was talk about him possibly playing last night's game, so most likely I'm coming into the mind that he's going to play. We don't have lines or whatnot yet, but what do you take of this?
Yeah, so we are talking about Alex Tuch in Buffalo. He missed 4 games, but in the few weeks before that was averaging over 3 shots a game, over 5.2 cupful points per game. That's the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League, kkupfl.com. Over 21 minutes of ice time. And, he was getting back to his form from last year a little bit. Again, started slow with Buffalo starting slow. Was moved away from the Thompson line, and Buffalo was kind of splitting its top 2 lines. So I think it's reasonable to expect him to jump back into one of those top 2 lines, either playing with Thompson or potentially instead with Cousins or Middlestat or something like that. And, or Jeff Skinner as well. They've spread that last year's top line out a bit, but I think it's obviously good to have him back, and he should be productive. If someone happened to drop him, pick him back up for sure. Good, valuable player, hopefully for the rest of the season.
Yeah, so I'm in line with that now. Probably in this situation, do you think is that one thing I want to keep in mind with people is that, just kind of a side note, is that while that top line has been pretty set, is that this might be even a benefit for the second line, because I have a feeling that right now that you would say it's Cousins and Peterka, or it's going to be that second line. And right now Benson has been hanging around there. He might not be doing so much. So there is a chance that whoever gets bumped off from the top line, say Tuch goes there, or hell, even Tech might go to that second line, is that could even give a bump up to a Peterka who's been doing well, or even the center that takes that line. So overall, it's nice to just have another strong player back up there to help with that offense.
Yeah, pay attention to the morning skate lines tomorrow, Wednesday morning. That might give some indication as to whose value is going to improve and whose might drop if they're the ones being bumped out of the top 6.
Yeah, good point. And on that topic is that we don't have, it's nice to get any sort of information out of the Ducks. And then right now, what we do know is that Drysdale, Zegras, and McTavish are all traveling with the team. And when I say traveling with the team, they have a road trip from Wednesday of this week to Monday, consisting of 4 games. There was a video of them all practicing, or at least on the ice. I'm not sure how involved they were. There was no actual definition of how rigorous it was. And there was an interview with Drysdale where he said, in quote, "Hopefully I'll get to play a game or 2. So it doesn't look like, at least on his end, that they're very, all 100% and ready to go for tomorrow's game. But it's going to be that situation of just, if they're sitting on either your IR or maybe a Drysdale, he maybe didn't get drafted or dropped because he was injured for so long. This is the kind of the light to just pay attention, keep an eye out, and then possibly one of these games on this road trip, you can see them come back and hopefully help bring that team back into relevance. Because as I was mentioning before, they were looking pretty interesting, but now they kind of, I don't want to say same old Ducks, but they kind of petered off and maybe back into the relevance that they thought. probably not much more to say with that. So keep an eye out for whatever Ducks news that the team or the beat reporters are able to get a hold of. And with that, we're going to go to our ad break. And welcome back. So now that we've gone through that sad long list of injuries and suspensions, now we get to talk about the play on the ice. And then with that, we're going to start with our hot and colds. First is a name that you might not know is Tyson Foerster. Derrick, can you give us a little bit of background on this guy?
Yeah, it's funny. He's been on the top line in Philadelphia with Sean Couturier and Travis Konechny for almost a month now. He replaced Owen Tippett when Owen Tippett was moved down, and he's been on the top power play for at least a few weeks as well. I can't say exactly when that started, but he's really started clicking with his line mates recently and has 7 points in his last 7 games now, while averaging 2.33 shots and over 18 minutes of ice time in that stretch. And he's only 7% rostered, but a useful center and right wing eligible player. So maybe worth checking out if your league is deep enough to value that kind of offense, or if you're really squeezed on right wing potentially. It's not oftentimes a third wheel on a skilled top line. Doesn't always pick up points, but he's doing it right now. So we'll see if he can keep it up.
Oh yeah, for sure. There's a lot of talk about Tippett potentially being of value and having that interest there. And if this keeps up, I feel like that at the very least, the value that people are attributing to Tippett preseason could be at least transferred to Foerster as he is producing. And then at that very amount is that we're talking about the Ducks. Philly was with them last year, but at the very least, I'm not sure how far they are up on the standings, but I know at the very least they'd be in a playoff position if the season ended today, and I can't believe I'm saying that. So, got to leave that last season bias of Philly behind you. This team might actually be something, and top line, top power play, I'm with you, is that has a potential of being something. And talking about top line is that we got Sharangovich, who's now from the trade with Toffoli left the Devils and is now on Calgary. He's playing on the top line with Lindholm, even though all the blunders every day it felt like the lines are changing. But one thing that's being consistent at least is that it's Lindholm and then Sharangovich together, and it's been kind of keeping in line with 4 points the last 5 games. And then the nice thing is that 4 of those 5 games, he had 3 shots on goal. So even without those points, he's doing something else. And right now, I'm not going to say that, this team is a wagon. We all know that they have higher hopes to where they are right now. But depending on the league that you have, this is going to be a person that's a good chance on the waiver wire. People may have remembered him for the time that he was playing third wheel with maybe Hughes or Heischer last year, that he's producing right now. He's being put in his spot to produce. And at the very least is that the nice thing is that with those line changes, is that he's being stuck there with the top line, is that shows that the coach believes in him. So hopefully that is something that kind of keeps in line with kind of going forward, that even if he goes on a slight lull, that he's not just booted off to the road and gets a chance to keep his game together with Lindholm. Now on to, say, the other side of the coin. We're going to go to cold streaks. And right now we have a pair, and sadly, it's the team that we were just talking before, the Devils, Meier and Toffoli. Derrick, can you give us a little bit of background on this?
Yeah, so Toffoli and Meier have been playing alongside Jack Hughes the last few games, but it really hasn't worked out for them. They are running a 5-game pointless streak, both of them. And that's really disappointing, considering, both their skill and their superstar line mate they're playing with. Toffoli also has 2 shots on each of his last 2 games on power play 1. Meier only 1 shot in each of his last 2, and currently on power play 2, although that's moved around a bit throughout the season so far, especially with his injury recently. Now, what I find interesting about this situation is that Hughes himself is also pointless in the last 3 games, but he has 18 shots total in that stretch, as compared to his line mates who are just shooting a few each, as was mentioned. Hughes' shots aren't going in, and that's maybe impacting, the point getting of his line mates. But it's interesting to me that, he's the one taking so many more shots than both of them combined right now. Often I would have thought of Toffoli and Meier both as big shooters. So we'll see if that changes. But right now it seems like Hughes is not finding either of his line mates open and is just taking the shots himself, and nobody's scoring.
Oh, that's interesting to see that many shots for like a disparity between that line. Is that now? I'll be honest, I am horrendous doing trades, so I normally just play with the waiver wire and just find my value there. In that sense, is that with Hughes being the player he is, and both of them play with him, would you see this as a potential buy low scenario, or is this a situation where you're just going to stay to the side and just be like, you drafted these guys, hope for the best, and sit on what you have?
Yeah, I'm a little biased as a Meier manager in the Cupful myself. I actually drafted Erik Karlsson in the 3rd round, but then was offered a trade for Meier, whom the person who had him drafted in the 2nd round, and I ended up deciding to make the trade, and then Meier got injured, so I haven't really benefited from it, but I'm still hopeful it can eventually work out. Yeah, Hughes is a force. You look at his shot count the last month, and there's more games where he's shot over 8 shots than under, I think. It's pretty incredible. So as long as they stay playing with him, or getting some power play exposure, I think it should turn around for them. But yeah, this last stretch has been really awful for sure. So like I said, I'm biased, but I think buy low on Meier is an option. Toffoli, you got to consider that he wasn't really expected to be as valuable at the beginning of the season. Consider whether it's a buy low, or if I think if you're buying on them, I would pay more for Meier at this point than Toffoli, just because of the maybe higher ceiling there.
Yeah, I'm with you with that, and especially with the, as I mentioned before, as well, I'm not the greatest in trading. Is one thing I do like to do is at least look at the pedigree before, and I feel like, as you mentioned, is that people are drafting Meier in the 2nd round, or at least that high, is that he had that pedigree before, and I don't think much of his game has changed. It's that kind of Houdini's box of people talking on the Discord of where it went and why is it different. So hopefully he has the history of playing well, that he has the higher ceiling. I'm with you on that. And with that, that is the end of our show today. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to follow us, the show, on Short Shifts KK, as well as Brian and Elon and Keeping Carlson. Please use Game Day tweets to get all that information. As we were mentioning before, there's a lot of lines in flux, and injuries and outjuries. So with Game Day tweets, you get all the up-to-date information. You don't have to go to Twitter. Elon and I make sure that you get all that information there. And with that, I would like to thank you, Derrick, for coming short notice and call it a show. Thank you, and you all have a good night.
Till we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.